Indica is unlike anything I've ever played. Alternating between photorealism and 8-bit graphics while featuring one of the most miserable yet intellectually deep stories I've ever played, this is the tale of a nun set in an alt-history early 20th century Russia. It's a narrative-focused third-person puzzler featuring equal parts art house stylings and absurdity. It is unique and I think I loved it. You'll start out as the eponymous Indika, a nun living in a convent where everyone hates her. The game is primarily narrated by the voice inside her head. She believes it to be a demon, one that haunts her every waking moment and routinely causes her to lash out in reality. Indika is sent to a neighboring town to deliver a letter during a war-torn period of alt-Russian history. It is seemingly set between the late 19th and early 20th centuries, with towering architecture that mimics our own, though on a vastly larger scale. The game is coming first to PC on May 2nd, with a release later in the month on consoles. I played on PC, and for roughly 5 hours I walked, biked, climbed, and ran my way through a frozen Russian countryside as dogs chased me, nightmares hounded me, fish smacked me, and of course my clothes ended up coming off. There's nothing really happy here. Instead, you'll find a really well-written and voice-acted affair focused on faith and filled with absurdity. There is a scene later in the game that I think most people will find a bit disturbing, though it was handled about as tactfully as one could hope in a video game. Indika is smart. She's disturbed and very light of frame, so you're never going to be a hero in the game, which is a linear tale focused on Indika and eventually a traveling companion and their faith. Answers aren't really given, only hinted at, and when the credits suddenly started rolling, I felt surprised at first, before realizing that, yeah, I think the story was properly finished there. The majority of the game takes place from a third-person perspective, though whenever the game shifts to past events in Indika's life, things go full-on Celeste with heavily pixelated graphics on a 2D plane. Gameplay during the 3D segments is fine. You'll mostly walk around or hold forward on the right bumper to run. A will climb up, and X interacts with objects. There's a pretty decent variety of puzzles, some being platforming while others are moving objects around in various ways. The 2D sections feature some very light jumping puzzles, one where you ride around a steam-powered motorbike and are a fun change of pace. In them you'll learn about her past life and why she ended up in the convent. Everything is so bright, colorful, and happy in those scenes that going back to the 3D photorealistic world is like a smack in the face, reminding you of how terrible the life she now lives is. I'm not sure if the game has alternate endings, as there is a point system for leveling. The points and levels don't do anything, and the game constantly tells you that, but I'm curious if things go differently if you max out said points. I'm tempted. I think I'm going to try and find out probably post-launch. There is a gameplay mechanic that sees Indika pulled into demonic realms, and you can hold the left trigger to pray and temporarily pull yourself out of them. It doesn't get used very often. I really wish it had been, because it was a really cool way to set up environmental puzzles. And the face models in the game are so good that my wife thought it was full motion video when I showed her the trailer. The animations are really good, though they did bug out a lot as the characters got stuck on things in the environment. NPC pathing can be broken if you get in their way, and I did have to restart a section twice to fix it. The environments are mostly frozen exteriors or huge industrial interiors. When you enter a town though, things up in the imagination department with like gigantic bells towering hundreds of feet, or fish the size of blue whales just lined up by the dozens as you walk around them in a gigantic cannery. Indika's greatest strength though is in its writing and voice acting. Games of this scope often suffer from the "I am acting, hello" style of English translations. Indika had some of the best, most natural voice acting I can remember in any game, let alone one with a real small budget like this. The writing feels natural, with people coming to grips with how the reality of their situations is unfolding. It's a lot of talking and not the type you can or would want to skip, Nick. The gameplay is mostly mediocre. It's the talking that made me fall in deep like with this one right away. There are scenes of absurdity with very goofy music and some weird camera angles that love attaching themselves looking directly at people's faces in a pretty unsettling way. Turned me off in the trailer, but made sense in context. The game's story is never happy. It's downright miserable most of the time, but don't let that turn you off. Though, it is really focused on being an art house style production, so that might. It never really felt up its own butt though, and despite it tackling an extremely serious subject in one of its final scenes, I think they pulled it off. There isn't a lot of music in the game, but what is there is mostly more modern synths and a mix of some old-timey video game chiptunes. The game is set in an alt history that imitates like 130 years ago, which made those choices feel odd, but like with most other things, I ended up really digging it. Bug-wise, I had those 2 times where NPC's pathing broke and one crashed while playing on PC. Console versions are set to hit in quote-unquote May of 2024, shortly after PC maybe, so make sure you look into the port quality. Wrapping things up, Indica is an odd, wonderful title. Mixing 3D photorealistic art with occasional jumps to 2D pixel graphics, it makes some bold choices. Excellent writing and voice acting carry mediocre gameplay and created an experience I will never forget.